If you truly want to live a life of depth and meaning, the first step is to stop running outside yourself for answers. The world outside is loud, constantly demanding your attention, pulling you into distractions, dramas and superficial chatter. But nothing of lasting value will come from this noise. Real wisdom, real power grows quietly inside, and for that you must focus on yourself and stay silent. Silence is not just the absence of sound. It is a fertile field where your mind can rest, where your thoughts can settle, and where you begin to see clearly. When you speak less, when you stop trying to explain or prove yourself, you create space for your inner voice to rise, the voice that knows, that understands, that is free. The ego is always eager to fill the silence with words because it fears emptiness. It craves attention and validation. But true strength is found in restraint. When you learn to stay silent, you take control of your impulses and your energy is no longer wasted on empty noise. You become more grounded, more centered. Focusing on yourself means turning your gaze inward, not in judgment, not in self-criticism, but in observation and acceptance. You begin to understand your thoughts, your emotions, and the subtle forces that drive your actions. This self-mastery is the foundation for real freedom. Only when you are stable within can you navigate the chaos outside without being tossed around. Silence and focus are not signs of weakness, but of profound strength. In solitude, transformation happens. Your inner landscape changes and you become a source of calm, a wellspring of energy for yourself and others. When you stop speaking unnecessarily, you no longer feed the confusion and the noise in the world. Instead, you become a beacon of stillness and clarity, so turn inward. Or focus on yourself with devotion and discipline. Stay silent, not out of fear or passivity, but out of respect for the power that grows in quiet. In that silence, you will find the truth of who you are, and the world will seem less overwhelming because you are no longer lost in it. This is not a journey for the faint-hearted, but for those who are ready to meet themselves without distraction, without escape. Focus on yourself and stay silent. This is where the real work begins and where true freedom is born. In this world, everything is clamoring for your attention. Sounds, images, opinions and endless chatter pull you outward, asking you to respond, react and engage. Yet amid this cacophony, your own inner world is often forgotten or neglected. When you allow your focus to drift endlessly toward the noise outside, you lose touch with the deepest part of yourself, the silent center where true understanding and peace reside. The external noise is designed to keep you distracted, busy and fragmented. It feeds the restless mind, which is always hungry for new stimuli, new judgments and new distractions. But if you remain caught in this flow, you become a puppet to forces beyond your control, constantly reacting without awareness. To break free, you must learn to turn inward, to listen deeply to the quiet that exists beneath the surface of the mind's chatter. Inner exploration is not about escaping the world, but about finding your root in the midst of it. When you start to observe yourself, your thoughts, emotions, sensations without judgment or hurry, you begin to discover the vast space within that is untouched by the chaos outside. This space is not separate from life. It is the foundation from which life can be fully lived with clarity and joy. By focusing on yourself, you are not becoming selfish or self-absorbed. Instead, you are cultivating the ability to respond to life consciously rather than reactively. The noise outside often demands immediate answers and loud opinions, but true insight grows in the stillness of your own presence. Only when your inner world is settled can you engage with the outside world without losing your balance. The habit of looking outward for validation, answers or identity creates a restless mind that never settles. This restlessness fuels anxiety, confusion and dissatisfaction. When you explore your inner landscape with sincerity, you begin to understand the nature of your mind and emotions. This understanding brings a sense of freedom, for you realize that you are not your thoughts or feelings. You are the awareness in which they rise and pass away. The process of inner exploration requires courage and patience. It means sitting quietly with yourself, facing your own fears, doubts and illusions without distraction. The world outside often offers endless entertainment and noise to avoid this confrontation. But the real work happens in silence and stillness. The more you practice turning inward, the stronger your ability to remain centered amid any storm grows. Noise will always be present. It is the nature of the world you live in, yet you can choose where to place your attention. When you give your energy to the outside distractions, you become fragmented and scattered. When you give your attention to yourself, you become whole and rooted. This is the subtle shift that changes everything. A shift from being driven by the world to being anchored in your own presence. Ultimately, inner exploration is not a destination but a continuous unfolding. There is always more to discover within yourself, deeper layers of awareness and greater clarity waiting beyond the surface of your habitual thoughts. The more you dive inward, the less the external noise has power over you. And in this silent space, you find a freedom that no outside circumstance can take away. Silence is often misunderstood as emptiness or absence, but in truth, it is the most profound presence there is. A space where life itself breathes and unfolds naturally, without interference from the restless mind or the constant noise of the world. And when you learn to embrace silence, you begin to touch the very core of your being that is always calm and steady beneath the surface turbulence. In silence, the mind stops its endless chatter, the river of thought slows down, and for the first time you can see clearly what is happening within you without distortion or judgment. Because words often cloud reality with opinions, stories and fears. But silence cuts through these illusions, revealing the raw, unfiltered truth that has been waiting patiently to be known. The power of silence is not about withdrawing from life or becoming passive. Rather, it is an active presence that sharpens your awareness and deepens your understanding. Because when you hold silence within, you are no longer scattered by distractions or consumed by reactive emotions. And this inner stillness becomes your anchor in the midst of chaos, your sanctuary from confusion. In a world that prizes noise and constant communication, silence is a rebellion against superficiality, a return to authenticity, and it teaches you that sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. That listening deeply to yourself and to the moment holds more wisdom than the loudest words or the quickest reaction. And in this listening, your life begins to transform. Silence nurtures creativity and insight because it gives your mind the space to rest and renew, allowing new ideas and realizations to emerge naturally rather than being forced. And when you cultivate silence regularly, you develop an intimate relationship with your own consciousness, learning its rhythms and depths as you would with a beloved friend. The practice of silence also reveals the subtle energies within you, the flow of breath, the heartbeat, the sensations of the body, which are often drowned out by noise and distraction. And by tuning into these subtle signals in silence, you become more embodied and connected to life itself, experiencing a profound aliveness that cannot be captured by words or external achievements. When you carry silence within, your presence becomes magnetic and calming to others because it speaks of stability and peace, a refuge in the storm. And this power is not something you display or boast about, but something you embody quietly, influencing the world through the depth of your being rather than the volume of your voice. Finally, silence is the doorway to wisdom and liberation. For in silence you meet yourself without masks, you confront your fears without avoidance. And you discover that the true nature of your existence is untouched by circumstance or condition. And this realization opens you to infinite possibilities beyond the limits of the noisy, distracted mind. The ego is a restless force within you that constantly seeks to establish its identity by proving itself to others, craving validation, recognition and superiority. Yet this urge to prove is born out of a deep insecurity, a sense of not being enough as you are. And so the ego pushes you into endless battles of comparison and competition that drain your energy and cloud your true nature. When you feel the need to speak up, to defend your point, or to assert your importance, it is often the ego responding to a subtle fear of being overlooked or dismissed. And this compulsion to prove can trap you in a cycle where your sense of self becomes dependent on external approval rather than internal wholeness, making you vulnerable to every opinion and judgment that comes your way. Avoiding the ego's urge to prove means learning to rest in yourself without needing to convince anyone else of your worth or knowledge. Because true confidence does not arise from proving, but from simply knowing who you are beyond the roles and stories you carry, and this knowing is quiet, steady, and does not require noise or display to affirm itself. The moment you stop feeding the ego's need to prove, you begin to experience a profound freedom. Freedom from the pressure to perform, to impress, or to justify your existence. And this freedom creates space for genuine connection and presence, where directions are not battles, but opportunities to share and receive without expectation. Often silence is the most powerful response to the ego's urge to prove. Because when you resist the temptation to speak out of compulsion or defensiveness, you conserve your energy and allow the situation to unfold without your interference. And in this stillness, the ego's illusions begin to lose their grip as you no longer give them fuel. This does not mean becoming passive or indifferent, but rather cultivating a clarity that discerns when speaking is necessary and when it is merely the ego's noise. And with practice, you develop the ability to respond from presence rather than reaction, from depth rather than defense. And this shift changes the quality of every conversation you have. Avoiding the urge to prove also involves humility, not in the sense of self-deprecation, but as an honest recognition of your limits and openness to learning and growth, because when the ego's need to dominate recedes, the heart opens, and you find joy in being vulnerable and authentic rather than being right or superior. In the end, the ego's urge to prove is a barrier between you and your true self. And when you move beyond it, you discover that your essence does not require validation or recognition. It simply is whole and complete, and this realization dissolves the need to compete with others or defend your identity, allowing you to live from a place of peace and freedom. Self-mastery is the profound journey of understanding and directing your own mind, emotions and actions rather than being controlled by them. And it is the foundation for living a life of freedom and fulfillment, because when you master yourself, no external circumstance can shake your inner balance or peace. This mastery does not come from force or suppression, but from awareness and acceptance. Becoming deeply familiar with the patterns that govern your thoughts and feelings, observing them without judgment, and learning how to respond with clarity rather than react with confusion or impulse. And this awareness creates a space of choice within you. The ultimate goal of self-mastery is not to become perfect or infallible, but to be fully present and in command of your own being, so that you act from a place of wisdom and compassion rather than fear or desire. And this presence transforms every moment of your life into an expression of your true essence rather than a performance dictated by outside pressures. When you begin to focus on yourself in this way, you realize that the battles you face are not against the world, but within your own mind, and the distractions, doubts, fears are obstacles that can be overcome only by turning your attention inward and cultivating discipline and patience with yourself as you navigate the process. Self-mastery requires dedication because the mind is naturally restless and prone to wandering, constantly pulled by impulses and distractions. But with persistent practice of silence, focus and self-reflection, you build the muscle of inner control, so enabling you to choose your responses rather than be driven by habit or emotion. As you grow in self-mastery, you discover an ever-expanding freedom. The freedom to be yourself without masks or pretenses, the freedom to face challenges without fear, and the freedom to remain steady and calm regardless of the chaos that may rage around you. And this freedom is the foundation for true happiness and fulfillment. Moreover, self-mastery is not an isolated journey, but one that naturally enhances your relationships and interactions with the world. Because when you are grounded within yourself, you bring presence and clarity to others, fostering understanding and connection rather than conflict and confusion. Ultimately, self-mastery is the highest form of self-respect and self-love, because it means you are willing to meet yourself honestly, to face your weaknesses and strengths alike, and to continuously grow beyond your limitations. And in this commitment, you find not only your true power, but also a profound peace that surpasses all conditions. Solitude is often misunderstood as loneliness or isolation, but in reality, it is the fertile ground where deep transformation takes place, because when you remove yourself from the constant noise and demands of the outside world, you create the space necessary for true change to emerge from within. In solitude, you are left with yourself, your thoughts, emotions and a silent presence beneath them. And this unfiltered encounter is both challenging and healing. For without distraction, you begin to see patterns and habits that have shaped your life without your awareness. And recognizing them is the first step toward transformation. The outer world is full of distractions that keep you busy but rarely allow you to rest or reflect. And by embracing solitude, you step out of that endless cycle and enter a different dimension of being where time slows down and the mind becomes calm enough to witness itself and its conditioning. Transformation through solitude is not a quick fix but a gradual unfolding, a patient process of letting go of old identities and stories that no longer serve you. And as you sit quietly with yourself, you begin to feel a shift, a softening of resistance and an opening to something greater than your habitual self. This transformation is often subtle, invisible to the outside observer, powerful in its effect, because as your inner world changes, so does your relationship to the world around you. You become less reactive, more centered, and more connected to the deeper currents of life rather than surface appearances. Solitude also brings clarity about what truly matters, stripping away the superficial desires and fears that usually occupy your attention. And in this clarity, you find the courage to realign your life with your authentic values and deeper purpose, which leads to a more meaningful and joyful existence. The practice of solitude does not mean withdrawing permanently from the world, but learning to cultivate moments of stillness and presence wherever you are. So that transformation is not confined to isolation but integrated into everyday life, making you a living embodiment of peace and wisdom. Ultimately, transformation through solitude reveals the truth that the most profound journey is the one inward, where in the silence of your own company, you meet your true self. And this meeting is the source of all healing, growth and liberation, opening you to a life lived fully awake and free.